The evolution of the mind-body-spirit complex is, as previously described, the consciousness being first, in first density, without movement, a random thing. Whether you may call this mind or body complex is a semantic problem. We call it mind-body complex, recognizing always that in the simplest iota of this complex exists, in its entirety, the one infinite creator. This mind-body complex, then in second density, discovering the growing and turning towards the light, thus awakening what we may call the spirit complex, that which intensifies the upward spiraling towards the love and light of the infinite creator. Let's define the three components of the mind-body-spirit complex separately. These terms are all simplistic descriptive terms, which equal a complex of energy focuses. The body, as we call it, being the material of the density which you experience at a given space-time or time-space. This complex of materials being available for distortions of what we would call physical manifestation. The mind is a complex, which reflects the inpourings of the spirit and the outpourings of the body complex. It contains what we know as feelings, emotions, and intellectual thoughts in its more conscious complexities. Moving further down the tree of mind, we see the intuition, which is of the nature of the mind, more in contact or in tune with the total beingness complex. Moving down to the roots of mind, we find the progression of consciousness, which gradually turns from the personal to the racial memory to the cosmic influxes, and thus becomes a direct contactor of that shuttle, which we call the spirit complex. This spirit complex is the channel whereby the inpourings from all of the various, universal, planetary, and personal inpourings may be funneled into the roots of consciousness, and whereby consciousness may be funneled to the gateway of intelligent infinity through the balanced intelligent energy of body and mind. You will see by this series of definitive statements that mind, body, and spirit are inextricably intertwined and cannot continue, one without the other. Thus, we refer to the mind-body-spirit complex rather than attempting to deal with them separately, for the work, shall we say, that you do during your experiences is done through the interaction of these three components, not through any one. With the primal distortion of free will, each galaxy developed its own logos. This logos has complete free will in determining the paths of intelligent energy which promote the lessons of each of the densities given the conditions of the planetary spheres and the sun bodies or sublogoi. As the logos creates its plan for evolution, then the chosen form by a sublogos is invested. The sublogoi differentiate some experiential components within the patterns of intelligent energy set in motion by the logos, which creates the basic conditions and vibratory rates consistent throughout a galaxy. Upon this second density plane, the two higher of the subvibrational levels of second density beings had the configuration of the biped. However, the erectile movement which we experience was not totally affected in these beings, who were tending towards the leaning forward, barely leaving the quadrupedal position. There were among those second density forms, which when exposed to third density vibrations became the third density, as we would call sound vibration human entities. That is, there was loss of the body hair, the clothing of the body to protect it, the changing of the structure of the neck, jaw, and forehead in order to allow the easier vocalization and the larger cranial development characteristic of third density needs. This was a normal transfiguration and occurred within a generation and one half, the time measured in years being approximately 1,350. Those who had been harvested of this second density planet were able to use the newly created physical complex of chemical elements, suitable for third density lessons. There is one necessity for third density. That necessity is self-awareness, or self-consciousness. In order to be capable of such, this chemical complex of the body must be capable of abstract thought. Thus, the fundamental necessity is the combination of rational and intuitive thinking. The third density mind was capable of processing information in such a way as to think abstractly and in what could be termed useless ways in the sense of survival. This is the primary requisite. There are other important ingredients. The necessity for a weaker physical vehicle to encourage the use of the mind, the development of the already present awareness of the social complex. The further development of physical dexterity in the sense of the hand is also necessary. The third density entity is self-sufficient only through difficulty and deprivation. It is difficult to learn alone, for there is a built-in handicap, at once the great virtue and the great handicap of third density. That is the rational, intuitive mind. Thus, the weakening of the physical vehicle, as we call it, was designed to distort entities towards a predisposition to deal with each other. Thus, the lessons which approach a knowing of love can be begun. This catalyst then is shared between peoples as an important part of each self's development, as well as the experiences of the self in solitude and the synthesis of all experience through meditation. The purpose of incarnation in third density is to learn the ways of love. The quickest way to learn is to deal with other selves. This is a much greater catalyst than dealing with the self. Dealing with the self without other selves is akin to living without mirrors. Thus, the self cannot see the fruits of its beingness. Thus, each may aid each by reflection. This is also a primary reason for the weakening of the physical vehicle, as we call the physical complex. The optimal incarnative period of the third density entity is somewhere close to a measure we call a millennium. This is, as we may say, a constant regardless of other factors of the third density experience. There is a particular use for this span of life in this density. The mind-body-spirit complex of third density has perhaps 100 times as intensive a program of catalytic action from which to distill understandings and learnings than any other of the densities. Thus, the learning and teachings are most confusing to the mind-body-spirit complex, which is, shall we say, inundated by the ocean of experience. During the first, shall we say, perhaps 150 to 200 years as we measure time, a mind-body-spirit complex is going through the process of a spiritual childhood. The mind and the body are not enough in a disciplined configuration to lend clarity to the spiritual influxes. Thus, the remaining time span is given to optimize the understandings which result from experience itself. Within the third density, it is necessary to build destruction of the physical vehicle into its design, for the spirit complex is not experienced as a shuttle that it is not aware of the appropriate degree of intensity of learning and increment of lessons. Therefore, not to build into the physical vehicle its ending would be counterproductive to the mind-body-spirit complexes therein residing. For within the illusion it seems more lovely to be within the illusion than to drop the garment which has carried the mind-body-spirit complex and move on. Thus, the physical body goes through the aging process that leads to the removal from the third density incarnation of the mind-body-spirit complex. At the beginning of this particular portion of our space-time continuum, the average lifetime was approximately 900 years. What we call diseases existed at that time, because firstly, that which we speak of as disease is a functional portion of the body complex which offers the body complex the opportunity to cease viability. This is a desirable body complex function. Secondly, the second density other selves of a microscopic size, as we would call it, which have in some forms long existed and perform their service by aiding the physical body complex in its function of ceasing viability at the appropriate space-time. The lifespan of the physical complex would remain the same throughout the cycle, given the harmonious development of the learning teachings of this density. However, our particular planetary sphere developed vibrations by the second major cycle, which shortened the lifespan dramatically. In the first cycle, this was not severe due to the dispersion of peoples, but there was the growing feeling complex distortions towards separateness from other selves. The incarnation pattern of the beginning third density mind-body-spirit complex begins in darkness. You may consider our density as one of a sleep and a forgetting. The third density is the only plane of forgetting. It is necessary for the third density entity to forget so that the mechanisms of free will may operate upon the newly individuated consciousness complex. Thus, the beginning entity is one in all innocence oriented towards animalistic behavior, using other selves only as extensions of self for the preservation of the all-self. The entity becomes slowly aware that it has needs, shall we say, that are not animalistic, that is, that are useless for survival. These needs include the need for companionship, the need for laughter, the need for beauty, the need to know the universe about it. These are the beginning needs. As the incarnations begin to accumulate, further needs are discovered. The need to trade, the need to love, the need to be loved, the need to elevate animalistic behaviors to a more universal perspective. During the first portion of third density cycles, incarnations are automatic and occur rapidly upon the cessation of energy complex of the physical vehicle. There is small need to review or to heal the experiences of the incarnation. As the energy centers begin to be activated to a higher extent, more of the content of experience during incarnation deals with the lessons of love. At some point in third density, the green ray energy center becomes activated, and at that point incarnation ceases to be automatic. Thus the time, as you may understand it, between incarnations is lengthened to give appropriate attention to the review and the healing of experiences of the previous incarnation. Upon our physical death, as we call it, the mind-body-spirit complex is quite intact. The physical body complex you now associate with, the term body being but a manifestation of a more dense and intelligently informed and powerful body complex. In our space-time terms, there is a great loss of mind complex due to the fact that much of the activity of a mental nature of which you are aware during the experience of this space-time continuum is as much of a surface illusion as is the chemical body complex. In other terms, nothing whatever of importance is lost, the character or pure distillation of emotions and biases and wisdoms becoming obvious for the first time. These pure emotions and wisdoms and biases being, for the most part, either ignored or underestimated during physical life experience. In terms of the spiritual, this channel is then much opened due to the lack of necessity for the forgetting characteristic of third density. As an entity goes through the death process in third density, it finds itself in the metaphysical dimension or time-space. Although it is difficult to describe this realm adequately, due to the limitations of our language, we shall try our best. The hallmark of time-space is the inequity between time and space. In our space-time, the spatial orientation of material causes a tangible framework for illusion. In time-space, the inequity is upon the shoulders of that property known to us as time. This property renders entities and experiences intangible in a relative sense. In our framework, each particle or core vibration moves at a velocity which approaches what we call the speed of light, from the direction of supraluminal velocities. Thus, the time-space or metaphysical experience is that which is very finely tuned and, although an analog of space-time, lacking in its tangible characteristics. In these metaphysical planes, there is a great deal of what we call time, which is used to review and re-review the biases and learn teachings of a prior, as we would call it, space-time incarnation. The extreme fluidity of these regions makes it possible for much to be penetrated which must be absorbed before the process of healing of an entity may be accomplished. Each entity is located in a somewhat immobile state, much as we are located in space-time in a somewhat immobile state in time. In this immobile space, the entity has been placed by the form-maker body and higher self, so that it may be in the proper configuration for learned teaching that which it has received in the space-time incarnation. Depending upon this time-space locus, there will be certain helpers which assist in this healing process. The process involves seeing in full the experience, seeing it against the backdrop of the mind-body-spirit complex total experience, forgiving the self for all missteps as regards the missed guideposts during the incarnation, and finally, the careful assessment of the next necessities for learning. This is done entirely by the higher self, until an entity has become conscious in space-time of the process, and means of spiritual evolution, at which time the entity will consciously take part in all decisions. The process in space-time of the forgiveness and acceptance is much like that in time-space, in that the qualities of the process are analogous. However, while in space-time, it is not possible to determine the course of events beyond the incarnation, but only to correct present imbalances. In time-space, upon the other hand, it is not possible to correct any unbalanced actions, but rather to perceive the imbalances and thusly forgive the self for that which is. The decisions then are made to set up the probabilities of correcting these imbalances in what we call future space-time experiences. The advantage of time-space is that of the fluidity of the grand overview. The advantage of space-time is that, working in darkness with a tiny candle, one may correct imbalances.